who are silently now in heaven, or those of you who, thank God, are still here on earth, who now can become free from the shackles that you have been forced to endure since your paths intersected with the devil. Today, it's the devil who will be condemned to be behind bars for the rest of his life. He will never be free, thank God. He may have destroyed lives, but he has not destroyed memories. And I'm so grateful for the stories that all of you shared this week on behalf of your loved ones and behalf of yourselves. But for the victims whose voices have been stolen, and the family members who sadly ran out of time and could not make it here today, I want you to know that there are 13 angels watching this today. And they're with us right now. They have this opportunity to see this too. I would ask that as we are in the presence of these 13 who have left this earth but have gone to a better place, that you join me in a moment of silence for them and for all those who are still here with us or who may have passed but have experienced this horror and this nightmare. You would bow your heads. On behalf of the people of Orange County and the state of California, Your Honor, again, please accept our just heartfelt thank you for the way you've conducted this court, your personnel. We're so appreciative.
Thank you, Mr. Spitzer. Would the district attorney representing Santa Barbara wish to be heard?
Thank you, Your Honor.
25 years ago, I prosecuted my first sexual assault case in which the recipient witness was a loved one of the victims. At that point, I assumed the only traumatized person would be the victim. 3 groups of people in this courtroom know that that assumption is wrong. The recipient witnesses of crimes committed by the defendant, the prosecutors, and the defendant himself. I know the recipient witnesses know that because they lived through it. I know the prosecutors know that because they listened carefully to those witnesses. And I know the defendant knows that because he is driven to inflict the greatest amount of pain that he possibly can. And therefore, it wasn't enough for him to rape or beat or shoot his victims. He wanted to take inflicting human pain to the highest level possible. Therefore, he often ensured that their loved ones saw or heard his victims being tortured or killed. That's just who Joe DeAngelo is. My best friend, LADA Jackie Lacey, recently told me, if you really want to hurt me, hurt someone I love. Well, this defendant really wanted to hurt. He really wanted to hurt as many people as he could, and he did just that. Around the same time that I prosecuted that case, I prosecuted my first rape of an intoxicated person case. Again, at that point, I assumed that if she couldn't remember being raped, that had to be better than remembering the gory details. Once again, I was wrong. And how do I know that? Because the victim told me so. She said, every morning when I wake up, my first thought is that something terrible happened to me. I just don't know what. I just don't know what. I don't think I can ever get over this thing until I know those details. And then she started to cry. And a very long minute went by, and she said, I'm actually jealous of rape victims who remember being raped. Yesterday, as I listened to Debbie Dominguez's powerful, powerful words about not being able to enter her home or know the details of what happened. And then I thought about Doug Domingo, Brian Sanchez, Dr. Offer, all of whom are here today. And then all of the other victims' loved ones who will never know the details of what happened to their child, their mother, their father, their uncle, their friend. And I thought maybe some of them also felt they couldn't begin their healing process until they knew all the details. To them, I humbly suggest you don't. I too have experienced great loss. I too experienced that. And I believe you, like me, have a hole in your heart that you hope will never heal. Because you love them. You love them so very much. And I believe that is what you need to know. Proceed with your healing process. What you need to know is what you already know. In life, you loved them and they loved you. And now that this case is finally over, perhaps what you need to concentrate on, the details of that love. Focus on the things that made them lovable and allow yourself to let those memories make you smile again. I believe it is possible. True healing can come from that knowledge. Because knowing that you are loved and that you were loved is truly the most powerful knowledge of all. Again, thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Would the district attorney representing Tulare County wish to be heard at this time?
Good morning, Tim Ward, Tulare County District Attorney. Your Honor, when your gavel falls today, this sentence will be final, and this case will soon then be viewed through the prism of history. And as we have seen and heard this week, the defendant slowly ceases to be the focal point of that story. Instead, my prayer going forward is the legacy which remains will focus on the triumph and the resiliency displayed by the survivors that we've heard from this week. Though questions will inevitably remain, we should continue to be steadfastly focused on the compassion justly due these families assembled here today. Though these despicable horrors began in Tulare County, we will not be defined by evil. Instead, our entire community stands silently alongside the Snelling, the Hupp, the McGowan families, and all families here today and families across this state. In searching for some positive message to remain, I say this: The triumphant spirit of these families loudly cries across this state and across the entire world in one unified single voice, crying out to other families who have been victimized, yet they patiently, agonizingly await their day in court. In that unified voice, the world is now told, never give up. You are not forgotten. Like many families that we've heard from this week, others across this nation are living a never-ending, nightmarish journey, a journey of continually closed doors. Today, they are shown and they are told, never give up hope. As science and technology evolve, the space for evil like this to operate within gets smaller and smaller. Simply put, the DNA will never forget. And by God's grace, may the doors of justice open for other families. That voice of hope is the true legacy that shall remain, and it shall not be silent, ever. On behalf of the Snelling, the Hupp, and McGowan families, the Visalia Police Department, and the entire Tulare County community, Your Honor, I want to thank you for providing a model of judicial decorum that has shown remarkable deference to the families and the survivors this week. You have given the state a glimpse into why we have a system of justice in the first place, and that is to serve victims. You have allowed their voices to resonate so loudly, and you have provided a model that other courts would do well. And
Thank you, sir.
as District Attorney of Tulare County, it is my honor to speak on behalf of the victims and survivors listed in count 1 of the complaint and give voice to Professor Snelling and Officer McGowan, who cannot do so today. But with their voice, I hereby ask you, Your Honor, to sentence this defendant to the maximum allowed under the law.
Thank you, sir. Would the District Attorney representing Ventura County wish to be heard?
Good morning, Your Honor. I too want to thank you for the courtesy and kindness you so graciously extended to each of the victims over the last 4 days. Your Honor, as we have witnessed during these victim impact statements, this is a case about light and darkness. The victims and survivors who testified before this court are people of light. By their courage, they have shined a very bright light on the magnitude of the crimes before this court. They painted a picture of the immense impact these horrific crimes had on their lives. In a sense, they have also brought to life their loved ones. In doing so, they have honored their memories as people of purpose, people of character, people that would have made a difference in this world were it not for their brutal murder at the hands of the defendant, who today, thank goodness, at last faces judgment. And in their statements, the victims and survivors also revealed to us the fundamental goodness of the human spirit and its will to endure, to thrive, even in the face of unspeakable suffering, loss. We must also confront the terrible darkness of the defendant. who sits before this court today stoic, devoid of humanity, lacking any remorse, and utterly unredeemable. And it is telling that his behavior both during the crimes and since his arrest reveals a person who consciously, who willfully, who intentionally avoids the light. His crimes were always committed in the dark of night. And it was common for him to cover lights, to cover furnishings, to cover televisions, to avoid any ambient light. And even now, here in this courtroom, he turns away from the light and dare not face or look at his accusers for fear that the truth of their testimonies might penetrate deep darkness being. Yesterday, during his victim impact statement, Drew Wittoon likened this proceeding to the horror one might see in a war crime. Certainly no event in modern history can fully compare the extermination of 6 million Jews. But still, Wittoon's analogy is fitting in this case when one looks at the whole, the crimes committed by this defendant. That analogy also reminded me of a story that was told by the chief prosecutor at Nuremberg, former United States Supreme Court Justice William H. Jackson. And the story, I believe, serves as a metaphor for the importance of the rule of law and justice itself, today and always. According to this story, a visitor at a cathedral under construction approached 3 workmen and asked them what it was that they were doing. They were all stonemasons. First muttered, "I'm earning a living." The second gave an uninspired reply, "I'm laying this stone." The third one looked up at the cathedral with a gleam in his eye and his face lit up by his and said, "I'm building a cathedral." Now, one might question the comparison of what we do here today to the building of a cathedral, particularly given the grotesque, gruesome, and ugly nature of the crimes before this court. But I do want to point out that over the last 4 days, we consciously and intentionally avoided showing any images of the gruesome crime scenes that are so much a part of this case. We did so not to marginalize the brutality and sheer cruelty of the defendant's crimes, but instead to honor, to shine a light on, and to pay tribute to the lives of the victims and their survivors. Your Honor, no one in this courtroom doubts or is uncertain about the ultimate sentence that you will impose today. And we acknowledge that no judgment by this court can bring back or fully restore the lives impacted by this cruel serial killer and rapist. Still, you have presided over a very emotional yet dignified and respectful proceeding for the purpose of meting out man's justice on this defendant. And as district attorney for the Ventura County, I am grateful for the way you have acquitted yourself, conducted the proceeding. It is also my fervent hope, my prayer, that much like that stonemason looking up at the beauty of the cathedral he was building, the victims who appeared before you can look up and feel a sense of renewed hope, sense of purpose, sense of life, with the knowledge that today, in this courtroom, in this time, in this place, we all did the very best we could do to deliver man's justice, which, as we know, is never fully accurate. I now respectfully ask the court to impose the maximum sentence authorized by law and the plea in this case. And I
Thank you, counsel. Does the district attorney representing Sacramento County wish to be heard at this time?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I stand here as the district attorney for Sacramento County, but I stand here incredibly proud of this team. I thank the defense team for your professionalism through the entirety of this litigation. Judge Bowman, you have demonstrated dignity and grace that is remarkable. It has been 16,417 days since Joseph DeAngelo began his reign of terror. 44 years, 11 months, and 11 days. For those in Sacramento, it's been 16,136 days since the first rape of Phyllis. 44 years, 2 months, and 4 days. It's been 42 years since Brian and Katie were taken from this world. And it's been 12,529 days since Janelle, that beautiful light, was taken. 34 years, 3 months, and 18 days. A few days after this plea agreement, the plea on June 29th, I had an email forwarded to me from a local journalist, from a woman from Sacramento named Pam. It could have been written today. In my belief, it encapsulates how I think everyone that has sat in this courtroom for this last week or sat in their homes and watched this transpire feels. And I'm going to quote that. I am wrung out. I almost put DeAngelo in the subject line, but I cannot give him any more headlines. I am 71 years old, third generation native Sacramentan. I lived through the terror of the East Area rapist. Over the past 40 years, I have read everything regarding this case. No window is ever open or unlocked at night, ever. Gates on either side of our home are locked always. Lights surround our home. My close friends all feel the same. Recently, a contractor in my home questioned why my sturdy, large, nailed picture window facing out hadn't been considered for replacement with, quote, nice sliders with screens to open out. I looked at the 40-something sternly and I said my always ready answer. 3 words: East Area rapist. He made some comment about how he'd heard something about him, but he'd been, quote, arrested. I explained, you don't understand. I lived it. It will never go away. She goes on to say, while I was not a victim, I was a victim. On Monday, June 29th, I sat in front of my TV and I cried. I cried for the victims. I cried for the families. The horror, the terror of what those who died went through in their final moments. As a person of faith, I put my faith in God's love, that He immediately covered those victims in peace and in love. I have to believe that in order to put my foot forward every day. Pam followed up with a note to me just a couple days ago. My heart, my being continues to weep for those victims. For the last week, our hearts and our beings have wept for each of his victims and their families. Their words and their stories will never be forgotten. As described by so many of the murder victim families and the crime victims, our society has been deprived of exceptional and extraordinary people. These rapes and these murders, in the words of our victims, have cut across families, friends, generations, and entire communities. In the words of Brian Sanchez, overwhelming grief is an understatement, and true justice is an overstatement. Personally, I have faith that their souls have been covered in peace. My greatest hope for all of these victims and their families, perhaps, is best put in their own words, as we heard this week. The greatest revenge is to live your lives. Paint your children and your grandchildren's rooms again with hearts and rainbows. Water ski again. Know that the monster of your childhood or your younger years is gone forever and will die alone in the dark. To the defendant, or as Mr. Wittoon called him, the convict, there is honestly little left to say. Your name will fade from the headlines. But despite that fade, know one thing. Until the day you leave this earth, this incredible team, a team that has worked for decades to find you, to arrest you, prosecute you, convict you, will not just promise you, but will ensure that you will never succeed at deceiving or manipulating the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation into believing that you are some feeble, inept old man who somehow deserves better housing, treatment, or privilege. Lastly, Your Honor, and perhaps and what I think are some of the most powerful words we heard this week from Chris Pedretti. Mr. DeAngelo, there is no prayer strong enough to save.
Thank you, Counsel. Well, we're going to take a very, and I mean very short break, like 5 minutes. I'm going to have my court reporter exchange out for another court reporter. I wouldn't want her off too far. Okay.
All right, everybody, we're going to be in recess for about 5 minutes. If you could just recess in place, that would be great. Just remember, it's only going to be about 5 minutes, so if you step out to use the restroom, hurry back, please.